Brilliant. Well, hello everybody and welcome to this year's ESG panel. And I'm delighted to be back because a year ago you would have seen us here talking about ESG as well. And so it's very much our time to look at what's evolved. And it's quite a punchy question that we're answering today in terms of ESG progress. Is it dying or is it just being rebranded? And for me, in my role as head of horizon scanning and strategic foresight at Marsh, all the time I'm seeing business have to evolve their view on important topics like ESG and sustainability. And if we look at the last year, an awful lot's happened. This time last year, we had Trump just having been elected. Maybe a month ago, we had the head of the IMF saying that uncertainty is the new normal. And then we've just had COP30, where new language around resilience is very much becoming fluent for boards and executive teams. Now, here at Resourcing Tomorrow, I've got a couple of interesting statistics for you all. Did you know that this year we have 93 different countries represented at this event? And within those 93, we have 63 who have got government level representation. And we hear news about uncertainty being the new normal. And I'd almost challenge for our panel today to think about how these changes are affecting that through the ESG and sustainability lens. And turning over to our panel, we are absolutely delighted to be joined by some of the real leaders in this global resourcing community. We have on the panel policymakers. We have those working on consolidated mining standards. We have specialists in production, community, strategy, and this is really bringing together all of the different viewpoints that you, as an audience, are going to wish to hear. And that's without the investment and also the insurance lens that I bring through my role at Marsh. So the exam question for you all is going to be around ESG. Is it dead? Or is the acronym ESG dead? Or is it more that it's evolving? And that term ESG, just to say, is quite poignant for me because you may not know that it was Kofi Annan and my friend Paul Clements Hunt who, when they were at the UN, invented the term ESG. And so, you know what? When we're talking about it maybe disappearing, it's something to really reflect upon. Is it actually evolving? And in the next 45 minutes, we're going to hear some great viewpoints, very much etched in the consulting experience of people like yourself, Gerhard, but also very much etched in the practical experiences of our panellists. So, the way we're going to run this is we're going to get started with a punchy question and answer. So for each of our panellists, and I'm going to start, Ed, with yourself as being nearest to me. We're going to work along. You're each going to introduce yourself and you're going to explain how you, in your role and in your organisation, in one sentence, are evolving your ESG priorities. Over to you, Ed, to get us started.
All right, well, thank you very much, Bev, and thank you everybody for joining this morning. It's always gratifying to see lots of people coming along and sitting to listen to people talk about ESG. I don't think that was happening in previous years, so I'm really pleased to see the increased focus. I'm Ed Johnson. I work for Gemfields, which is a coloured gemstone miner in Africa. We own a emerald mine in Zambia, Kagem mine, and a ruby mine in Mozambique, Montepuez Ruby Mining. I suppose we're fairly unique in the world of mining in that we just focus on one area, coloured gemstones, which is a bit unique. For my role, if I'm meeting people first time, I say I am maximising impact in Africa through coloured stones. Obviously, there's layers to unpack within that. And principally what we're trying to do is alignment against industry standards. IRMA is the standard that we're choosing to demonstrate our progress, and also the Voluntary Principles Initiative, and also ISO standards that we align against both of our mines. I think that's the headline of what ESG means to me. Obviously, I'll unpack more about coloured stones and gemstones and jewellery and how ESG, whatever we call it, is critical for us because gemstones and jewelry transmit and are responsible for demonstrating love and relationships, so they have to start with a positive on their journey in the supply chain. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Over to you, Carol.
Hello, good morning, everybody. I'm Carol Plummer. I'm the Executive Vice President of Sustainability, People and Culture for Agnico Eagle Mines Limited, which is a gold mining company with operations around the world. So in my role as oversight for sustainability, it's really a big part of my role is to ensure that all of our sites are resourced properly to be able to meet our various commitments. To do a lot of coaching and helping them move along with their commitments, and then I get the joy of being able to tell their stories of the good work that they're doing on the ground, because sustainability is not done at corporate office, it's done in the interactions with the people and with the environment right on the ground. So the question you asked us, Bev, is how are miners evolving? And I think I was looking at it on a longer term as opposed to just since last January, although I'll have comments on that in some of the other questions. But I think that over the last few decades, miners in general have committed to various frameworks and protocols and principles and so on, Agnico Eagle included. And we have committed towards sustainable mining, the responsible gold mining principles, and numerous other frameworks which are designed to help mining companies to evolve their responsible mining practices and also to be more and more transparent with it. So I think that it's through the use of these frameworks, applying best practices, and then also applying the concept of continuous improvement, that miners in general have turned from maybe a couple of decades ago where sustainability was all about safety and the environment, to now sustainability englobes so many subjects from community and indigenous relations, biodiversity, climate change. There's such a wide range of things now that are englobed by those words of ESG and sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Can I turn it over to you, Hethen? What does ESG mean for you?
Good morning, Bev, and thank you very much, everyone, for attending. My name is Hethen Hira. I'm the Investor Relations and Communications head at Pan-African Resources. We're a gold mining company based in Johannesburg, South Africa. We've got operations in some of the oldest mining areas in the world, 140 years of continuous mining in Barberton, and in the Wits Basin, and we've also recently started operations in Australia. And for Pan-African, ESG has always been integral in whatever we do. The end game is always sustainability and sustainability of the communities around our operations. Mining is a finite resource, so we plan ahead in terms of how we sustain the communities post-mining. And I think that's an important part of mining and its impact. Many see it as negative, but we believe that it's one of the most positive things that can uplift communities, rehabilitate the environment. We've got tailings reprocessing facilities that are renewing areas where once there was water pollution, air pollution. It's now a new vibrant area, and we continue to impact those areas where we operate and where we're going further. So the great work is being done on the ground. Mining companies do not always tell the good story of what we do, and that is my role at Pan-African Resources. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Hethen. And almost taking that comms perspective over to your good self, Ben.
I'm Ben Chalmers. I'm the Senior Vice President of the Mining Association of Canada, and among other things, I lead our work managing towards sustainable mining as a standard on behalf of the Canadian industry and our international association partners around the world that have adopted it on behalf of their national industries. I also am one of a number of people involved in the development of the Consolidated Mining Standard alongside our partners, World Gold Council, ICMM, and Coppermark. And I think in terms of how ESG has changed over the years, I think there's a much better understanding of the role that standards can play and should play in articulating a consensus of what good practice and leadership looks like. And I mean, to illustrate that, when I started with MAC almost 15 years ago, we were in the midst of a very divisive debate around we should incorporate some pretty basic elements like safety and biodiversity into TSM. Not that long ago, a couple of years ago, when we made a decision to incorporate EDI into our work, it was a 5-minute conversation, and our board said, just get on with it, do it, we need it. So it's quite a different tone around the role that standards are playing, and I think that's come about further over the last couple of years with the need now to simplify the standard space, to work in that area of consolidation, to remove some standards off the table and to replace them with a unified effort.
Thank you very much, Ben. And you're seeing that journey really come to bear, aren't you, Monica, in your role?
For sure. Thank you for the invitation first, and thank you, Bev, for running the panel today. My name is Monica Moretto. I'm Vice President of Sustainability for Pan American Silver. We are a silver mining company with a big position as well on gold, and we're in all the Americas. We're in 8 countries of the Americas, so we are quite exposed to different experiences throughout the years. We have 9 operations and 3 in closure, so 12 in total. So there's a lot of work that we do constantly around all these topics. And just to summarize on this evolution of ESG, I think that what we've noticed and what we pretty much everybody is doing the right thing have done is move from that compliance-driven checklist space to a long-term strategy, right? We're co-designing with communities when it's possible, governments when it's possible, and wherever possible around key topics like climate change, water stewardship, and the long-term resilience of a community. I think they're key. That, along with the SPIs in our case, which are social sustainability performance indicators, and I'll talk about it later, I think that they've been important to us, managing all that with clear information, but also with that co-design. And I think that applies for a lot of companies as well.
I love your language of checklist to co-designing, and I might have to come back and use that again myself. But Gerhard, over to you.
Thank you, Beverly, and good morning, everybody. My name is Gerhard Bolt. I'm a principal at DSS Plus, formerly known as the Pond Sustainable Solutions. I lead our climate and sustainability practice for Sub-Saharan Africa. I'm also our global lead for energy transition and decarbonisation. So perhaps a bit of an overrepresentation of the E side here today, but we really exist to save lives and create more sustainable operations. And I believe the mining environment has evolved in the sense that they truly value ESG, provided that it's grounded in operational performance.
Thank you very much. And as you've heard, we've got a really diverse skill set here today to really get you up to speed on, is ESG dying or is it almost rebranding? Now, I've got a different acronym for you all. How many of you have heard of the term VUCA? A good scattering. I work in risk and I work in resilience. And so VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And what we're increasingly seeing is that the world around us, the world of resourcing, the world of our jobs, the world of our homes, is increasingly uncertain. And so as I put that thought to the panel, how can organisations like yours seize and use ESG to help manage that volatility? And I'm going to start with your good self, Gerhard.
Thank you, Bev. Like any good consultant, I do appreciate a good framework, and some of the best frameworks are the simplest. And regardless whether it's an ESG labeled project, any initiatives need to prove that it can create value on 4 pillars. The first being, to what extent can I utilize ESG to enhance my brand equity? How can I use it to increase revenue? Can I use it to reduce cost? And potentially, how can it significantly reduce risk? And I'll provide a few examples. And why this works very well is because most capital allocation frameworks makes provision for assessing these attributes. When it comes to brand equity, we've seen, for example, Vale marketing their low carbon nickel into battery supply chains. So obviously, they're enhancing their brand equity by adopting the sustainability narrative, from electric vehicles, and therefore securing long-term contracts from automakers. When it comes to increasing revenue, it's quite clear that aluminium and copper produced from low carbon sources like hydroelectricity are reaching premiums when compared to the London Metal Exchange benchmark prices. Reducing cost, I think one that's quite self-evident there is renewable energy. In many cases, the levelized cost of electricity for renewables are lower than they are, for example, for fossil fuels. And many would argue that it's baseload, that's a big consideration for mining. But we've seen in South Africa, for example, with deep gold and platinum mines, that very often the load profile from renewable sources very mimics the production profile at an operational level, making it hugely beneficial. And then the last one, how can you significantly reduce risk? And I think the GISTM is a good example where it creates a risk-based framework that considers technical as well as governance attributes or aspects that need to be considered in tailings management. And I think when you consider projects and they are either classified in either one of those categories, it certainly enhances value. Thanks.
Thank you. We all love a good 4-point framework. Helps people think about it in a structured manner. The other one that I quite like is a real kind of fundamental top line, bottom line, and I also overlay that with people, planet, and prosperity. So I'm going to come to you now, Carol, because you have, I think, some really good experiences in your role of how this is really coming to bear for your entire organisation. Can you share some experiences?
Yes, certainly. So in my role, having oversight over sustainability, we find that using the Towards Sustainable Mining protocols across all of our operations is an excellent governance tool. A number of years ago, we added in all of the requirements through our other commitments like responsible gold mining principles, voluntary principles on security and human rights, and so on, all into a single integrated audit which covers Towards Sustainable Mining and all of our other commitments through these other frameworks. And so Towards Sustainable Mining covers a number of different subjects, as I'd mentioned, everything from crisis management, community relations, through to tailings management, water stewardship, and so on. And each of those is then broken down in great detail under a number of elements. So because we audit on a 3-year cycle, there's 2 years of internal audits followed by a year of external audit. It allows me to take a look at how each of our operations are doing in terms of actually managing across this vast array of elements and thereby meeting our commitments towards sustainability in general. And I can use it almost as a heat map across all of our operations to see where perhaps we've got operations that are doing really well in some places, and there are some best practices which we can share across the operations, and where maybe somebody is struggling a little bit more and needs some additional resources or coaching or whatever they need in order to bring them up to that minimum level of standard that we're looking for, and then drive beyond that towards leadership levels of standard. So that tool is something that I can use to be watching for risk and mitigating risk across the entire portfolio.
And it's interesting because, Monica, you led off with talking about checklists versus co-developing, but in your role there with the audit, the checklist is the lifeblood of your ability to maintain some of that consistency. And I bet there are a few people in the audience here who'd quite like your checklist for their own businesses. Mm-hmm. Now, you're running a very large organisation there through that audit process, Carol. Ed, I'm going to come to you now. I'd just like to hear from your standpoint with gemstones in focus, how you're seeing that weave through.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up the term VUCA. I mean, we're in northern Mozambique for our ruby mine in Cabo Delgado, which is most definitely a VUCA. It's also most definitely a Curragh. Well, some people debate that, but from our perspective, it's an area of conflict. Our ruby mine supplies about 50 to 70% of the world's rubies, and has been a significant player in Cabo Delgado. We're the largest tax player and have been for many years running. So we treat these responsibilities incredibly important. I mean, it is a resource, and in many ways we talk about the ruby mine, Montepuez ruby mine, or MRM as we call it, as being a beacon of hope for a province that has been forgotten and left behind by central government. That's one of the reasons for many of the challenges in the areas and in the communities around our mine. Insurgency is a risk, and illegal mining is rampant. This morning, our latest 24-hour situation report identified 657 illegal miners identified on our concession. The rubies are accessible 5 to 10 meters beneath the surface, and it's rainy season, so it's very easy to access water to wash the gravel beds and to find the rubies. And one ruby can sell from cents per gram to $600,000 per gram. So just to put that in perspective, people are talking about an increase in illegal gold mining at the moment. Gold price at the moment is about $150 a gram. Our rubies can sell for up to $600,000 per gram. So what you've got there for your ESG priorities is you are facing a significant risk from people who are willing to risk their lives on a daily basis and attack your security forces to get access to the extractive material that you're in charge of bringing into the supply chain in a responsible manner. So if we're talking about our desire to create a positive impact, in reality, much of my day, and I've just got back from Mozambique, my colleague Dave Finley and I were there for 2 weeks. I also spent 2 weeks at our emerald mine in Zambia. Much of our day in Mozambique is about reducing the negative impacts of illegal mining, the conflict that ensues from that, and the obvious human rights risk. I've already said we're a very committed member of the Voluntary Principles Initiative, and everybody, all of the teams receive training. But when you think about your ESG priorities, obviously we've got a strategy. It has 16 different goals, all right, which we're all familiar with. But human rights for us becomes the most critical one, because that's our daily risk. And that sucks in much of our people. There's 500 security, 500 team security a group at the mine, and it sucks up much of their energy. I mean, if you're being attacked by an impoverished, exploited illegal miner who's part of a syndicate and he's attacking you with a panga, quite frankly, any frameworks go out the window. It's about, how do I protect myself and do my job? And what did I learn from the training I had last week? So we can use that operational systems, but what's important for us is how do we reduce the bigger picture? And yes, we're in a VUCA, so it's a challenging environment. But reducing the impact of illegal mining, obviously we all, as miners here, work on the usual education, health, and access to alternative livelihoods. But until there is more due diligence done in the supply chain down from us, where people will really interrogate their suppliers, ESG for me is meaningless. And I say that from the fact that in some countries we operate where we operate feeling, against criteria of our ESG standards and our reporting and our transparency. And we sometimes have neighboring mines who are run, shall we put it, along more African lines. And I don't mean to denigrate, it's just a different way of doing business as opposed to being against international standards. Yet some buyers of jewelry selling to the consumers won't do any due diligence on our neighbors. All right? Now, obviously, I think that's wrong, and that's not from a self-promotion standpoint. It's about companies buying raw materials from us as miners must do their due diligence. Then they're going to ask increasing questions about your ESG profile, and you have to be ready to answer them. Okay? So for us, why do we get engaged in this? It's because our customers are asking us multiple questions. They're asking multiple questions because we report on issues. We have significant risks and significant issues, so we have to report on them, and then the questions come back where we need evidence to show what we're doing to reduce them.
Thank you. And you've mentioned the word standards there a couple of times, and there's clearly not a one-size-fits-all around how we do get this woven into whether it's the supply chain or whether it's ESG within your organisation. But Ben, if I can come to you, because to me, we met last year at Resourcing Tomorrow, and I was blown away by the work that you and the group are doing to try and develop, let's just call it that, umbrella standard. Could you just give us a few words on progress?
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. We just closed our second and final public consultation on the Consolidated Mining Standard just a couple of weeks ago, and so we are now moving into the final stage where we're working to assess the individual comments that were sent to us. We got over 3,000 comments from over 100 people, which is a little bit less than the first round, but not much. And we are trying to get another draft, the final draft, with the aim of finalizing the standard sometime next year. We're also in the process of standing up a new multi-stakeholder board for the standard. So we were just in the process of recruiting an independent chair, and there was a call put out at the beginning of this week for independent directors, a multi-stakeholder slate of directors for the board. So things are coming together, and we expect to have some news to share in the new year around being able to share what the final creation looks like. There's a few steps to go through. We have an industry advisory group and a stakeholder advisory group that will be meeting to review the work on integrating the last round of comments. So there's quite a bit of work to do left, but it is coming together.
Thank you. And so for me, standards are very much that foundational element. And standards, you're using the term sustainability, ESG. Those two terms are increasingly coming onto the table at the same time. Now, I work for Marsh, and so for me, having a conversation with the insurance industry around sustainability and ESG, that's business as usual for us. And I'm going to turn to you, Monica, because I think from your standpoint, when we've put our heads together, this is something that you're also finding, correct?
Yeah, I think insurance is sometimes not a happy topic internally in the companies, and it creates a lot of stress because it has been evolving. I remember years ago, the main concerns on insurance were around security of the mines where it was applicable. For example, we have a few of the countries where security becomes a main topic. And obviously the usual environmental impacts or environmental events were the ones that were running the show. In the last few years, I think that there's been quite a bit more introspection on everything that has to do with employment, strikes, employment happiness, of workforce happiness, and also with social conflicts and roadblocks, etc. Right? In a world run by social media, it's an interesting story because we've been this particular last 2 years, we've been asked a lot of questions around roadblocks, about strikes, but based on a lot of information that comes, from social media. There's a little bit of everything that comes through social media, and there's been very honest conversations. I think what's important to a company is that ESG is central to the insurance conversation because it's run by very hard metrics that most companies have. In our case, as I was talking about before, are called sustainability performance indicators, but they're run also by the risk matrix that the company has, and where in a transversal way you have environmental, social, and human rights impacts. And so I think all that is an education conversation on both sides, as understanding what they need and why they need that. I think sometimes it's not easy because there are a lot of back and forth on those conversations, but I think if you have a really strong system where you actually capture a lot of good information, that is actually significant evidence for an insurer to understand what's happening with us. And again, to our SPIs, for example, in social, talking about conflicts, we actually have an indicator on conflicts and have an indicator on grievance and have an indicator on human rights. And so for them, it's very important information. And we found that the more that we have and provide this information, the better communication and the better the communication goes.
So for me, that comes down to risk, having a risk framework within your organization. And there's never a time that you shouldn't start thinking about risk. And even if you're building up, because maybe you're a younger business, having a solid foundation that starts to think about those KPIs when you do then want to have a conversation with insurers, whether that's in London or elsewhere around the world. Like you've said, Monica, you will be able to hopefully draw upon data that you have to give them that confidence that it's not just talk, you're actually acting and you have evidence that you're acting. So with KPIs in mind, I'm going to pivot to the next question, which is looking at a bit more of the S in ESG. And Hethen, I'm going to come to you first. In reality, how are organisations balancing cost against the importance of maintaining trust and investing in that S partnership with local communities?
Thank you very much. I think at Pan-African we've established the S quite successfully in terms of, as I mentioned earlier, we focus not only while mining, also on the future. When we close, what sustains the communities and economy thereafter. So apart from the other risks that we address, this also addresses a social risk. Everyone cannot be employed by the mining industry. There's a lot of unemployment in the area. So we implement projects that encompass other members of the community. We've got huge agriculture projects that are self-sustaining and sustain the communities and create other small businesses, skills development and training. And I think we've come a long way in terms of the S around our operations. And we've got a blueprint that we will expand in all the areas we operate in.
And that idea about it being more than just the mine that influences the community, I think that's extremely important. And if I can almost lift us up and drop us into another geography, Carol, maybe you could just say a few words on this too.
Sure. So if we just start with the concept of trust, I think that trust very much starts with relationships and having access to be able to speak to people at the site, management, the site, community teams at the site, and so on. And we consider ourselves to be regional miners. We are global, but we're globally made of a bunch of regions that are tied together. And when we go into a region, we're going into it for we're looking for political stability, but we're looking for geological prospectivity, because when we enter a region, our goal is to be there for multiple mines over multiple decades. And if you're going to be a miner who's going to be in a region for multiple mines, it means you need to be able to establish social license to operate, not just for that initial mine, but over decades. And so for our mines that are fly in, fly out, we still try to fly people in from as close as possible from local communities in addition to further away. But very many of our mines are residential. So our management teams are local people. They're living in the towns. Their children are going to the same schools as the other people. Their kids are playing on sports teams and so on. So these are creating relationships in the community that really help to build that level of trust. And that's so critical to us, so that if a neighbor has a concern, has a question, is irritated by something, they know that they can come and start those conversations when it's still at level of being an irritation and it hasn't blown up into being a full-blown problem, so that we can work together and try to find an equitable solution. And layering onto that trust then is a layer of transparency, because I think, if we bring it back to the cost side of things, we need to be sure that we're managing expectations, right? So, a lot of people look at the gold price as it is today and think that, mining companies, they're rolling, it's over $4,000 an ounce, so you're making $4,000 an ounce, without realizing the millions, hundreds of millions of dollars that go into exploring to find the resource in the first place, building the operation, maintaining the operation, and operating it. So it's having a certain level of transparency and open conversation, so people understand what value they can extract from having the mine in the region, and then working together to build, to find sort of win-win solutions where the miners are able to continue to work and profit, but the communities are also able to profit from the operations.
And I've got just a couple of minutes left for the panel. So, Monica, I know that you would like to add something here.
I wanted to add something about this. Yesterday was clear messaging in some of the panels that we have to remember and keep in mind that in average 70% of our investments, through employment, through taxes, stays in the country, right? Some companies even is the 80%, and some are a little bit less, but it's a significant number on what we spend in a country. So I think that's important, but I think there are 2 points that for me are key. One is better communication. We still have to do a better job of communicating. Sometimes we're not very clear on our life of mine, for example, and closure becomes a big issue for companies. But also I think that creating legacy, and in that legacy space is the co-design that I was talking earlier, right? Because there is a lot of transferable knowledge that through the programs you get to the community, but in our case, we created legacy programs post-mine that are not related to the mine as well, that a little bit on farming, ranching, beekeeping, you name it. But they are actually, and the community is aware, and they choose those programs because they understand that that's their future as well. So I think all that combination as well contributes to create or have a good thermometer on what the acceptance is and create that ongoing trust.
Mm-hmm. And so to me, it's the polar opposite of VUCA, removing uncertainty and creating more of a stable situation that you can see moving forward.
Yeah.
Right, we're going to get kicked off the stage in a few minutes. So I'm going to go to yourself, Gerhard, and then you, Ed, for a couple of comments on this.
I think a final comment from my side relates to the topic of decarbonisation that we haven't really discussed here. And I just want to caution industry to be very careful about setting targets that you can't substantiate. I think if you have a net zero 2040, 2050 target and you don't accept the technical realities, the financial implication thereof, it actually is a form of greenwashing. So I think be very careful, be pragmatic. I think also that aligning to things like science-based targets and net zero obligations, there's medium-term targets that will most unlikely not be met. But it doesn't say that mining will not decarbonise. I think going forward, recognising the structural challenges, mining will still decarbonise organically. And I'll give quick examples. The Botswana's Yoneng mine in Botswana is going from an open cast mine to an underground mine, where an open cast, obviously, they're tracking with diesel. And the pre-feasibility study is already showing that the undermine operation, the trucking circuit will use battery electrics, the conveyor system will use electricity from solar. And there's a way in which this mine or this company will organically meet those objectives, because if you force that, I think we will become uncompetitive.
Thank you, and I'm glad that you've touched on the decarbonisation piece here, and maybe that's one we unpack further next year. Yeah. But Ed, I think you wanted to add something on the S.
Yeah, I really like what you said about, trust is about relationships. I just had 2 quick examples. I know we're tight on time, but it's so important to have the right people who are running your ESG or sustainability, or in our case, corporate responsibility programs. And they demonstrate how they care every day. I mean, they might have loads of mechanisms that they're reporting back on, but I want to give an example, and I'm on a London stage. I'm going to shout out my colleague Zephanias Mawawa in Mozambique, who one weekend when we were there recently was driving back for his daughter's wedding, a 12-hour a car journey, and he took 2 leaders from 2 of the communities around our mine for the weekend to his daughter's wedding, principally because in engaging with them regularly about all the issues that we need to work with them on, they'd been talking about the fact that they build houses differently in his area 12 hours drive away, and he took them with him for the weekend to show him how they build houses in his area. It's the people and the relationships that you constantly need to build on when you're doing good, meaningful ESG work. One other example, just a shout out, and I see some colleagues from the Dragonfly Initiative here in the room. Gemfields and a number of brands have been working on the Coloured Gemstone Working Group, run by TDI, and I think it's so important to get together with your customers and talk about what is important to them and to identify what is feasible for you, all right? There are some things that people in Paris who buy our rubies think about our mine that are just really not realistic for us. And they don't move the needle in terms of good sustainability or ESG. So having that conversation with your customers is critical. Having that conversation with your communities and that relationship and trust is critical as well.
And as you say that, what I guess I pull together is something you said at the start, Monica, which was the idea of checklist versus co-designing, co-developing, whatever you want to call it. It's the co-part that matters, and thinking about your audiences, but appropriate kinds of actions. So, Carol, you've talked about checklists and audits. Ed, you've just said that make sure the way you do it is appropriate to the areas that you're operating in, to the people that you're working with. I hear that loud and clear. Hethen, you work from more of a comms standpoint. Finish us off with just a comment on the importance of having that, let's say, collaborative approach on ESG.
I think when you work with communities, stakeholder engagement is the most important. It's the people that are impacted by your operation and who impact your operation. So manage expectations, maintain your social license to operate. And I think that's a theme that we're seeing with all our mining colleagues here and organizations involved in mining.
Thank you. So today we've talked about the future of the language of ESG, and hopefully what you've taken away is that ESG isn't dead, but the language of ESG, whether it's sustainability, whether it's social license, whether it's codifying, that is what is evolving. And so if we look forward to a year's time, when we'll have another panel on this topic, what I anticipate is that that journey will itself have evolved as well. So listen, can we all put our hands together and say a massive thank you to our brilliant panellists?